in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, can I see by a show of hands if you can hear me and see my slides? In that Andy's panel, please click the hand icon. Andrea, thank you. It looks like we are good. We are good to go. Thank you. On behalf of WebEdge Solutions, I would like to welcome you to our today's webinar, Introduction to Angular UI and UI Bootstrap. My name is Mikhail. I will be your instructor and your presenter for today. I'm the Director of Curriculum Architecture at WebEdge Solutions, a company which has been providing a broad spectrum of regular and customized training classes in programming, system administration, and architecture to our clients for more than 15 years. Some of the courses related to the topics I will be covering today will be given to you at the end of the presentation. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, please put your question in the questions pane. You can detach that window and put your questions there. I will be answering your questions as we go. So don't hesitate to ask questions, even though we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Your questions are always welcome. If I cannot address, I will see what I can do, and I will get back to you on that. Okay, we've got a great deal to cover today, and let's get started. So today our agenda will be based on three main points. We will give a very short introduction to AngularJS. In order to understand what is the whole thing about Angular UI Bootstrap, we need to understand what AngularJS is. If you know that system, then probably bear with me. Maybe you can step out for a second, maybe 15 minutes or so, and grab a coffee, and then come back and join us when we will start covering Angular UI and UI Bootstrap. AngularJS, it's all the rage. It's a very popular JavaScript framework. It's open source, started at Google, and basically the main value proposition of AngularJS is to provide the harness, the infrastructure plumbing for rich client web applications, single page rich internet applications. It implements on the client side in your browser the model view controller, the so-called MVC pattern, and more accurately on the JavaScript, it's more along MV anything, MV star, MV asterisk, where the role of the controller or any other bridge which binds model with view in bidirectional way can be performed by any artifact, such as just JavaScript function. The plumbing of AngularJS is provided on HTML in the form of special custom tag attributes, which are ignored by HTML, by the HTML layout manager, but they are relevant to AngularJS, which performs introspection of all the DOM elements presented on the page, and it builds its own context for your applications. Another interesting thing about AngularJS is that it provides the so-called two-way data binding. Today, two-way data binding is better understood when I show you some examples, some of the slides. So MVC is about three components: data or data model in on your HTML-based applications is represented by JavaScript objects. So that's the model. It can be literal, it can be an array, it can be an object, it can be whatever JavaScript supports. And those values of the model elements can be reflected on the UI. Controller at the bottom of this triangle provides the necessary management operations mutating JavaScript objects and making them aligned with your objectives. UI is the view portion of the MVC. Triage sends notifications. Controller provides the event handling, plumbing for on-click, on-mouse move, or mouse enter type of events, and they're transparently intercepted and action is taken. Also, UI provides embedded observation channel for any changes in the data model. And AngularJS makes it possible to reflect transparently changes in the model, like changing of the value, say toggling a Boolean from true to false and back on the UI portion. So traditionally, we are familiar with the so-called one-way data binding. We never actually think about it this way, but that's how HTML works. We've got our code expressed in HTML, and this is a declarative way, and that's the way we initially present our clients, our users, with some information, some content that we would like share with our clients. Whenever there is any change in the model, meaning that something changes in terms of JavaScript, the dynamic portion of our pages, those changes are not automatically reflected or propagated and reflected in the view on HTML. So you need to create your own handlers for those changes and use raw JavaScript or any of the numerous JavaScript frameworks like jQuery, Dojo, and many others to reflect those changes in HTML. So you would have access to a particular HTML by using maybe accessing anchoring by ID or by class, and then update the content of that element or change in its style or change it in any ways that we find necessary. Basically, the developer, the front-end developer, is always busy trying to keep the view and the model in sync, back and forth. So one way is limiting, and AngularJS gives you that flexibility where changes in the view are immediately reflected and pushed out from the model. So this is the diagram which is kind of nicely captures that two-way street. So we've got a template which is nothing more as an HTML with some code, maybe with some of those ng attributes, which get compiled. Compilation is about building the corresponding DOM-based structure and building objects on the JavaScript virtual machine heap. And we've got the view model tied together where any changes in the view are reflected in the model, and any changes in the model are reflected in the view. So, and AngularJS gives it for free, and all you have to do is just to download the AngularJS file as your primary kind of a library and use it. Many of those things that are happening transparently delegated to jQuery Lite version. So AngularJS does not reinvent the wheel across the board. It just finds most suitable pieces of functionality implemented elsewhere, and it uses them quite efficiently, cohesively. Unfortunately, AngularJS in certain areas is not particularly performant, and this is due to the inherent limitations of JavaScript. JavaScript is an interpreted language, even though some major breakthroughs are made to implement just-in-time compilation in JavaScript virtual machine, and Google's V8 and other virtual machines like in Firefox. They are extremely efficient, extremely fast, but still certain things are not there yet. And currently there is some action happening in ECMAScript technical committee to implement a key structure called object observe in native code, so that JavaScript can call it through JavaScript native interface, call it out into that low-level machine code, and that would dramatically improve performance of in many parts of AngularJS and, for that matter, other JavaScript libraries and JavaScript overall. So there is currently an implementation in different browsers of Object Observe, where you've got a callback which gets invoked on any changes in the object, in its state, adding new property, maybe other changes. Okay, so it's very useful and it's extremely performance sensitive. So let's quickly review what AngularJS gives you out of the box. So before we proceed to AngularUI and UI Bootstrap, let's see what you can get out of AngularJS. Maybe it would be sufficient for your purposes. So it just provides you a minimalistic bag of those tags, tag attributes that can be nicely merged into your HTML code, and you can specify the model variables, JavaScript objects that you would like to be used to control various aspects of your UI. So let's review some of those. The most, I guess, the simplest and probably more practical of all, ng-show and ng-hide. ng-hide, it's just, I guess, it's a mirror reflection of ng-show. And here's a code. Let me bring up. So we've got ng-show. So this is the AngularJS, so ng stands for Angular. It's an attribute which is ignored by HTML and is understood by AngularJS when it performs a reflection of all attributes and tags on HTML. And ng-show takes the value which is taken from the model. So currently it's a Boolean which can be toggled in one of the controller functions or in any of the services that you can call from inside your controller. So you can toggle, and whenever the hide and seek Boolean variable is set to true, we display this content. If it gets toggled to false, the content is hidden. Pretty much it does a very basic operation of changing the display CSS property, setting it to none. And ng-hide does the opposite thing. ng-class and ng-style take a little bit kind of a more extensive look at managing classes and styles, but everything boils down to very nice integration of your UI with JavaScript with the model. So in this case, we are using ng-class, which takes the following approach. So it allows you to apply two styles, which are expressed by CSS styles, shown here. So we've got Reddit, Greenit, and depending on which class is currently in effect, changing the background from red to green. So we've got, not shown here, Boolean variables which sit somewhere in your AngularJS application, which is nothing more than just JavaScript code, where you've got special, I guess, treatment of those Boolean variables. So whenever we've got is red to set to true, then we would be able to set ng-class class's background to red. And pretty much it can be orthogonal, it can be quite extensive, font size, I don't know, maybe the font color, and maybe any other styling that you might want. So it's just the same story, but it's pretty, I guess, minimalistic. It gives you some same capability, but it's very limited in scope. So let's move on to the next topic, and this is the Angular UI. So Angular UI is a set or suite of UI components, user interface components, which are implemented as AngularJS directives. So directives are those ng attributes that take on some functionality to perform a specific treatment of your UI. And AngularJS is very well suited for that purpose. So we saw a very kind of a basic, very, I would say, kind of a not very extensive functionality, but you see that all the necessary infrastructure is there. So it's just a matter of spending, I guess, some time and to implement those interesting UI components in AngularJS. And AngularJS team didn't want to reinvent the wheel. What they did, they just took existing elements that you can find in other UI frameworks, such as jQuery UI, maybe Bootstrap, and they re-implemented those, doing it very nicely and giving you much more leverage over what you can do with those elements. They kind of added a new dimension, making it not just flat. In many cases, it's rather limiting in case of Bootstrap, but they just extended it to the new dimension. And currently, there are 26 modules that you can view by going to this website. Okay, so 26 modules, and they're very efficient. They have been thoroughly tested, production ready. So let's take a look at some of those Angular UI components. Bootstrap, I put it on top so that we keep our focus on what we're actually covering. It's a Bootstrap components, and they did a very good job, and we will be talking about UI Bootstrap in a moment. Charts with JQplot allows you to build nice pie charts and what's not, different types of graphs, color them, provide some labeling, additional information, and building a very appealing user business-minded people friendly type of applications. Google Maps Grid is extremely powerful component, which is really extensive. We are going to talk about it in a moment. Leaflet and many more. So let's take a look at some of the more prominent examples of that Angular UI suite. UI Grid. What's interesting about those components is that they're provided in a very nice way. You can test them out. Some of those come with Plunker link. Plunker is an online editor, web editor, where you can experiment and just get the knack out of it without really building any application locally, kind of going through that trouble of downloading all the components, making sure that they are aligned, they have the same version, and it's just a matter of quickly prototyping and getting the feel and see if it really addresses some of the challenges or problem spots that you are experiencing in your application. So features of UI Grid are as follows. It's not exhaustive list, but probably more important. You can perform sorting of rows in a grid, in a table. You can perform filtering, in-place editing. You can pin a particular column so that it's not moving when you perform some readjustment of columns. You can perform grouping, finding aggregate values, and much more. So it's just, I don't know, it's like a Swiss Army knife. It just does everything that you might possibly want. So here's an example of what it looks like. So all you have to do is just, I guess the best way would be to go to their website. Probably they will allow you to get redirected to Plunker, or maybe there would be just some screenshots to view some of the more important, or maybe give you tutorials that you will find useful. So let's just take a quick look. So we've got a very nice smart table, which has a great deal of information, such as, let me just again bring this up. It calculates the number of rows that have been downloaded. Probably you might want, the way this grid is implemented, there is Ajax call behind the scenes, which fetches those 4,500 rows, and those are rendered nicely. You just have to provide schema for columns. It's pretty much like sort of a data definition language that you use in SQL. You have to provide headers, and a system would perform all the necessary decorations. As you see, we have an indication that we can perform sorting, right? So you haven't implemented a single, I guess you haven't written probably a single line of code, and all that stuff is part. It's sort of self-contained application that you just borrowed and you can embed. And when you perform any interactions with this grid, you can perform grouping, and inside the group you can perform all those SQL-like aggregations. You can perform count within a group, find minimum, maximum value, find sum. You can pin the column to the left. You can pin the column to the right. Let's say you find it not particularly useful at the moment. It's just getting in the way. So get it out of the way by pinning it to the left or to the right. And by typing in any values in the conveniently provided text boxes, you can limit it, performs auto-completion, filtering of all those values. It's kind of a resembles Excel spreadsheet. That's what it is. And as you see, you would have values that you are looking after, such as average value in a numeric fields. So system smart enough to understand that you are talking about numeric values. Okay, so as you see, it's a fully functional piece, and you can easily embed it. So you don't need to use JSF or any other frameworks to build that quite sophisticated widget on the application server side, and then push it out to all your clients. It's just enormous workload on your server. So when you start doing that kind of Angular UI component programming, you pretty much offload all that heavy lifting from this server over to the client, so that the client's machine would get a little bit busier, but it would be definitely not the load that your server is experiencing. And overall, you get kind of a new perspective on how you can do things. Angular UI is definitely your friend. Of course, it's not the silver bullet. There are always some caveats that you have to be aware, and that's where I guess we can transition from Angular UI to UI Bootstrap. It's not so much a contrast. I'm not trying to put them in different leagues or different areas. They have different specialization, and UI Bootstrap is just another Angular UI component. Right? It's just different philosophies, and that's probably the biggest differentiating factors that you need to consider. When you work with UI Grid and maybe with some other components, you might find that they're not particularly suitable for mobile devices. Right? And even though they do a very good job at being responsive, maybe adjusting the widths, and overall kind of morph themselves into smaller devices and trying to be as responsive as possible. But at the same time, they are not developed with that mobile-first kind of philosophy in mind. In contrast, UI Bootstrap is fully compliant with RWD, Responsive Web Design Principles. And that's, I guess, the biggest differentiating factor. So whenever you really target your clients or your clients using mobile devices, UI Bootstrap would probably be your first I guess, iteration on the UI portion. So let's take a look at what it gives us. But before we start looking at what UI Bootstrap is, it's necessary to understand what Bootstrap is. So Bootstrap, it's a front-end framework which has been around for quite a long time, and many people use it and they're happy. And in a nutshell, at its core, Bootstrap, it's just a bunch of style sheets, and that's how it started. So that is, I guess, that's how it was organically growing and eventually taking different iterations, different, there were some junctures where road kind of forks where the team of Bootstrap developers were taking leads. So they started as the basic style sheet processor, and then they added jQuery for adding some dynamism to make some animation to some of the components. And you can run Bootstrap without jQuery, but jQuery gives you a better support for more advanced UI elements. Bootstrap has proven itself to be a very robust technology. As of version 3, Bootstrap supports the mobile-first development, meaning that they target primarily mobile environments. So that's a key factor. And many elements, the way you can see them on a bigger desktop browsers, they are not particularly appealing. They kind of span the whole page unless you put them in a grid. So Bootstrap allows you to partition and create different sections on the page where you can put your components, which would be flexible and comply with responsive web design principles. And so all the styles are mobile styles, and responsiveness is enabled by default. Right, so when you be experimenting with Bootstrap components, playing with mobile emulators in your favorite browser, you would see how responsive it is. It takes into consideration the viewport settings and your screen width, and generally It might dramatically change the layout of pages, pushing your multi-column grid into one single column stacked up, where you would have a chance to scroll up and down and have the same content as it would be on the larger screens with larger real estate. Okay, so Bootstrap, Angular UI dev team realized that Bootstrap is a very valid, relevant technology, and they implemented most of the components in AngularJS, and that's how UI Bootstrap was born. Sometimes you might see references to this system as AngularUI Bootstrap or UI Bootstrap, but in essence, it's just implementation of Bootstrap styles and components which are styled using CSS styles using AngularJS. So what AngularJS does, it wraps up Bootstrap markup and CSS in AngularJS directives, like those ng something. And AngularJS automatically provides you access or hooks to integrate your Bootstrap, which is otherwise agnostic of any models that you might have with your model, with your application, which is a great value proposition on their part. And you would simplify things to a certain extent, like jQuery plugins are no longer required because AngularJS takes over that role, but you still require AngularJS. It's not like you would need Bootstrap CSS and you would need AngularJS. You need to make sure that you've got proper versioning of AngularJS, and normally it's not an issue. You'll just download the whole bundle. So UI Bootstrap has been tested across all known browsers, no issues. Of course, IE should be 9+. And all mobile browsers are supported. So that's the whole, I guess, idea behind using UI Bootstrap. So here's a list of the directives implemented in AngularJS. So those directives have the names borrowed from Bootstrap. Not all of them, I'm talking about this list, the first bullet. So not all of them have the UI portion. Some of them are just utility, plumbing type of directives which support some of the UI functionality. And the UI list is just a subset of the full set of directives, and those are the templates which mimic, create sort of a parallel structures than those found in Bootstrap. So when you go to the website, usually the best way would be to go to Angular UI, and then there would be a reference to UI Bootstrap, goes there. And as you see, they have the same kind of a background as Bootstrap, kind of a styled with Bootstrap. And here's the drop-down of all the directives that we are talking about. So when you select each of those, it gives you access to its examples, API information, on attributes. Sometimes it might be rather daunting to properly configure things, like I'm going to illustrate in a moment. But generally, it's not close-ended. It's open source project. JavaScript is a library which gets distributed at source level. You have total control. You can, I guess, modify things to your liking, and of course give attribution to original developers. And you can try out things in Plunker. Okay, so Plunker is very nicely integrated with the opposite. UI Bootstrap components can be easily dumped onto Plunker IDE and developed there. So project philosophy borrowed from the wiki site. is to provide lightweight directives implemented in AngularJS and just give integration of your UI with AngularJS, which is inherently supported by Angular by way of implementing the MVC pattern or MV asterisk, right? In addition to using AngularJS or AngularUI Bootstrap out of the box, you also have a way to customize those templates. It's a very powerful way of providing low-level control over the look and feel of different components. So here's an example of directive. Bootstrap comes with the alert directive, which creates a dialog for you, giving you kind of success, information, warning, kind of alert type of severe type of dialog, but pretty much giving you different text and different background color. When everything is cool, it's kind of a green. Information would be like blue, and then as a level of alert comes up through warning to error, it would go through orange to red. And that's how what it looks like. So we've got the directive, and that's how AngularJS, it's native AngularJS code. So everything here is JavaScript as is implemented in AngularJS. So we've got a function which implements the actual body core of that directive. And critical piece here is to see that we've got a reference to this template URI. So it can be embedded in JavaScript or it can be externalized. So that HTML, there is an option for you to download all those HTMLs which you can customize. You would need to install them on the server side. It's just static HTML, which you can customize, or you can provide some mapping to dynamically generate the content. So everything else is specific to directives. It's just a way to configure directives, so it might not be of particular interest. You might be only interested in customizing these components because they give you a very nice UI where you can customize your alerts the way you want. And everything else is just plumbing code, which would probably be extracted into something not so visible. It's a plumbing code. Just don't get, I guess, intimidated by this level of details. You can easily get UI Bootstrap by using any of those venues. You can download it directly, or you can use Node, Package Manager, Bower to install it from repositories. Okay, so in this case, you will get everything set up and ready to use right away. So for direct download, you've got an option to download a bunch of files. And in order to understand what they are, I've got a question, just let me address that. So is the older version of Bootstrap better in some ways, or is the new UI Bootstrap better in all ways? Yes, Jonathan, you would be better off to use the newer version of UI Bootstrap. Yeah, that's for sure. And I guess it would be more performant, and AngularJS is also progressing, so sometimes you can take advantage not so much of Bootstrap as you get advantage of Angular. So what you have here, we've got those files which are have TPLS in its name. TPLS, it's indication that this JavaScript file, which is minified, contains Bootstrap code serialized or kind of encoded or embedded in JavaScript. And you will see it in a moment. Right, so that TPLS, it's the way to get everything in a single package. You can also not use it, and you can download those templates as a set of HTML files, which you would unpack, unzip in your folder. You can use them out of the box, or you can customize them. So there are two ways. TPLS stands for templates. So here's what you would see when you open that TPLS file, right? So this is alert, which is currently embedded. As you see, AngularJS uses that template cache. It puts an element by this key, which corresponds to the module name. And the whole thing is like div. If you open Bootstrap CSS, you would find this fragment in Bootstrap components. UI Bootstrap implements it. As you see, it's just a fragment, a div section, which gets rendered in HTML. You see, it's a div section, lots of escaping happening, but as you see, we've got ng class, which we covered. We've got a button. ng show is bound to that Boolean variable, which just allows you to close or discard the dialog. As you see, everything is nicely implemented. But if you don't use the TPLS file, then that template would be the plain vanilla HTML file, which you can customize. Probably you would be able to add something in terms of maybe some disclaimer. Okay, please try again later. We cannot complete your request now, or something like that. So it's absolutely powerful, and it's now nicely integrated, very tightly and nicely integrated with AngularJS, which otherwise you would have to do with jQuery, writing your own code for handling those events. So it's a little bit of an overkill. So it's a relief. This is a sort of, I would say, boilerplate code, what you would have for UI Bootstrap page. So we are dealing with mobile devices. So we need to specify viewport with zooming set to 1. First, we need to import AngularJS, followed by, in most cases, you would be fine with using those TPLS files. Then it would be your application, which would implement your own directives, or your own application, which would depend on both AngularJS and UI Bootstrap, and the traditional bootstrap.css file. Okay, and your code would go into the body, and that's it. So you are, I guess, you're all set up. So that's the primary, I guess, setup. So what's happening when you develop your application? In AngularJS, we didn't cover that, but for those, I guess, who would like to know, module is the way to define your application. To say that HTML page is my AngularJS application. And in order to do that, you need to stake out that space. And you need to create a module, which in turn needs to specify a dependency on UI Bootstrap. It's just a moniker. It's sort of a kind of a literal, which gives you, it's an array, square brackets, and it gives you a way to say, I would like to leverage all the functionality stored in those modules. That's the way of AngularJS implements that dependency graph. And in turn, UI Bootstrap in turn has a dependency, as you see, on all the elements, all the components that it needs. So it kind of bootstraps the whole thing. And here's our UI Bootstrap alert that we talked about. Okay, that's how the whole thing gets bootstrapped. And here's an example of what you can do with UI Bootstrap directive, pagination. So it's very nicely formatted, and you would probably be able to see that, I guess, pagination directive in many places, in open source projects for sure. So it allows you to, I guess, go back and forth, go into previous page, go into next page, and it has very nice set of elements like callback for ng change when you go from one page to another. You specify the ng model, which would reflect the page number. So it starts at 1, and you can set it programmatically to progress further or back, and some other stuff which I'm not going to talk about in a moment. And this page shows you how you implement. So when you have that template or boilerplate page dropped, all you have to do is just specify your application. In our case, we use Pagination demo, and we reference Bootstrap. Ng-animate might not be needed. You can drop it. Generally, we are referring to UI Bootstrap. We specify the controller, which acts as that binding bridge between the UI and your model. And you specify as a current page, which is a model. So that would, if you set it to 5, then automatically the 5th element would be selected. And whenever there is a change caused by user selecting a specific page or going back and forth, you would be notified by the callback on page changed. Right, and that's page changed is specified as a directive. So those, as you see, those are directives. Those are plain vanilla AngularJS directives, and the component is implemented as an element, as tag. And I'm not going to spend more time than I guess necessary. But as you see, you've got fully functional application with very minimum involvement on your part, as long as you understand that, I guess, plumbing which exists behind. There are some, I guess, kind of a gray area, how to set up the total number of items per page and things like that. Basically, it would involve performing some arithmetic operations, like what number of items per page, number of bulleted points or something, and how many pages you would like to show. And that would be aggregate of those things. It would be the values that you need to specify. You see, we specify the property of items per page, and kind of a 6 would be a resulting value. So it performs some calculation, and that product would be used to identify the number of pages. Okay, so a little bit of a kind of a nuisance, but it works fine after, I guess, you figure out how it works. Okay, so that was it for my presentation. Of course, we barely scratched the surface. We didn't have enough time, but my guess is that I probably got your interest. So if you're interested in learning more, then I would recommend you to take on that Introduction to AngularJS Programming class. It's a 3-day packed, very high-paced class, which would bring you up to level with AngularJS, and you would be comfortable in using AngularJS in your applications. Responsive web design with Bootstrap, which also covers both Bootstrap and UI Bootstrap. It doesn't cover Angular UI, but it definitely has all you need to know about UI Bootstrap. It's a 1-day class. It's very kind of short, again, high-paced, and you will find it useful. Okay, any questions? Looks like we don't have any questions coming in. So I would like to thank you for attending this webinar. I hope that at least you found something that it'll give you, you'll find you found some food for thought, and it'll probably get you going. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Gary. Thank you very much. I wish you every success. And that's it for today. I'm calling off. Okay. Yeah, there is a question. Is this recorded for future viewing? Yes, Mary. When you visit the website, it will probably take some time our sysadmins to put the recording. Currently, it's being recorded, but it will take them some time. So I guess just visit that I guess links that you were provided for this webinar. There would be some additional information, or I guess get in touch with our website. visit and view the presentation section. Okay, all the best. Slides, yeah, by the way, Gino and other people who haven't received the slides, slides should have been forwarded to you, and there should be a link on that invite. For sure, that information should be there. Okay, and that's the primary purpose. Okay, so all the best, and I wish you all the best.